Hello, here's chapter 6, Operation Gadgetman. I've got the sellotape. Louise emerged from the kitchen, a roll of sellotape in her hand. Anne gave a secret sigh of relief. She was no good at this kind of thing. She never knew what to say or do when things went wrong with other people, and she always just ended up embarrassing everyone. Bean smiled at her. "It's all right, Anne," Bean said softly. Anne smiled back. "Wait a sec, Beans. What about your dad's notes on his oscillator?" Louisa frowned. "Aren't you going to look for them?" "Not yet. No way. Finding the kidnappers is the most important thing now. Not searching for useless information about Dad's gadget. I don't see how that will help find him." "But Detective Warner said—" "I don't care," Beans interrupted fiercely. "It's my dad who's been kidnapped, not his. Looking for stupid notes on the lousy oscillator will just have to wait. And what's more—" "So what do we do now?" Anne asked, deliberately interrupting. Beans took a deep breath, then another. She had to calm down. Getting angry wouldn't help anything. "First, we need a blank sheet of paper," Bean said quietly. "Then I put 2 pieces of sellotape on the front and the back of the door handle and peel them off very carefully. Then I put them on the plain paper. With the dark fingerprint powder, I should get a set of prints. That's the theory, anyway." Gosh, I'm not doing very well today, am I? Keep trying. "So you've not actually done this before?" Louisa asked. "Never. And the prints might not even be clear. They might be smudged, or I could smudge them, or I might have 2 or 3 sets of prints, one on top of the other. Lots of things could go wrong." "That's right, Beans. Look on the bright side," Anne teased. "Or the whole thing might just work first time." "Too right. You tell her, Anne," Louisa joined in. Beans smiled. They were right. She shouldn't be so pessimistic. She wasn't usually. Moving very slowly and carefully, Beans laid the sellotape on the outside of the door handle. Once she peeled it off, she held it by its extreme tips before placing it on the plain paper Anne had got out of the kit for her. Next, she did the inside of the door handle. Once that piece of sellotape had joined the first piece on the paper, they all huddled round for a look. The sellotape was marked with the dark fingerprint powder, and some kind of prints were definitely there. "The first set of prints are a bit smudged," Louisa frowned. "I don't think so," Beans said. "I think that's part of a palm print. The second bit of sellotape has the fingerprints on it. That makes sense. Think about how you'd turn a door handle. Your fingers would be on the inside of the handle." "But do they belong to your dad or his kidnappers?" Anne asked. "That's just it," Beans sighed. "I have no way of knowing. I'm going to have to try and find some prints that must be Dad's. Meanwhile, these ones can go in the top secret file along with the other clues. I think—" "Oh no!" Beans' face fell. "What's the matter?" Louisa asked quickly. "We came in here too," Beans said, stricken. "Did either of you touch the door handle?" Anne and Louisa looked at each other. Anne shook her head. "I can't remember." Louisa shrugged helplessly. "I don't think you did, because the door was already open, wasn't it?" Beans tried to remember. "I think you should take both our fingerprints as well, just to be on the safe side," Louisa said. Anne nodded in agreement. "I'd better do my own as well," Beans realised. She took a felt-tipped pen out of her case and coloured in the fingertips of first Louisa, then Anne, then herself. She pressed each of her friend's fingers to a clean sheet of paper, one hand above the other, before doing her own. Beans labelled each sheet of paper very carefully. Anne wiped her fingers on her shirt. Louisa held her hands out in front of her and eyed them with distaste. Ugh. She stretched out her fingers so that no finger touched the one next to it. "Yuck! What's next?" Louisa asked. "Well, next we go through Dad's workshop with a fine-tooth comb," Beans said. "If you find anything at all, let me know." 10 minutes and several questions later, they were all getting discouraged. Anne and Louisa thought they'd found several items, but Beans had an explanation for each of them. "This is getting us nowhere," Beans said reluctantly. "If there are any other clues in here, then I can't see them. Louisa, you didn't find anything in the corners of the room?" Louisa shook her head. "And there was nothing on the window sill or under it," Beans carried on. Anne shook her head. "Sorry." "And there was nothing in the waste bin?" Beans asked. Anne and Louisa frowned at each other before turning back to Beans. "I didn't check in the bin," Louisa said, surprised. "I thought you were going to do it." "I thought Anne did it," Beans replied. "Still, I don't expect we'll find anything in there." "Beans," Louisa warned. Beans headed for the bin, mentally telling herself off. If that was the way she really thought, then why bother doing anything at all? She began to fish through the bin. 2 dead batteries. At least I'm assuming they're dead. Bits of wire. More bits of wire. "Hang on. You found something?" Louisa asked eagerly. "So that's where the fish knife got to," Beans smiled, regarding the burnt, blackened top of the knife. "I do wish Dad wouldn't use our cutlery for—" Beans stopped in mid-sentence. Dad could burn every knife, fork and spoon in the cutlery drawer as long as he came home safe and well. She carried on searching through the bin. Yet more bits of wire. An insulating tube. "Oh, wait a minute. What is it?" Anne asked hopefully. At this point, Beans stuck her head right in the bin. Anne and Louisa stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Yes, right. There's a cigarette ash in here." "And your dad doesn't smoke," Louisa said, a slow smile spreading right across her face. "Exactly." Even in the rapidly darkening workroom, Beans's eyes were gleaming. "And Dad empties this bin every night, so the ash had to have been put in there today." "What kind of ash is it?" Anne asked. Beans frowned at her. "Anne, I'm not Sherlock Holmes, you know. I can't tell the difference between one brand of cigarette ash and another simply by sniffing it." "No, I meant, is it from a cigar or a pipe or a cigarette?" Anne said. Silence. "Good point." Beans stuck her head into the bin again. "I'd say it's cigarette ash, but they all smell disgusting to me." "Let me have a whiff." Anne barged Beans out of the way. "My granddad smokes a pipe, so I know that smell." Anne took a deep breath, her nose over the bin. "It's not a pipe, it's a cigarette." "I suppose it'd be too much to hope for that the cigarette tip is in there," Louisa said. Anne shifted through the quarter-full bin. "No, just ash," she said at last. "I'll put some in an evidence bag anyway," Beans said. Once they were sure that there was nothing else in the workroom, Beans led the way back inside the house. "You two can check upstairs. Watch where you're both stepping and don't touch anything," Beans warned. Louisa and Anne went to explore the upstairs, whilst Beans phoned her gran. It only took a few seconds' deliberation for Beans to decide that she'd wait for Gran to arrive before telling her what had happened to Dad. She couldn't exactly say, "How are you, Gran? By the way, Dad's been kidnapped," over the phone. No, she'd wait until Gran came round and they were alone. "Gran, it's Beans," she said the moment her Gran picked up the phone and said hello. "Well, hello, Beatrice. How are you?" Gran asked. Her voice was warm and normal and made Beans sad. Well, that's what I'm phoning about. Dad isn't here. Can you come over to stay with me until he gets back? He left a note to say I should ask you." Beans chewed on her bottom lip. That was about right. "Where is he?" Gran asked. "I don't know," Beans replied. Well, that was truthful. "Well, when will he be back?" Beans could hear the frown in Gran's voice. "I don't know that either. I'll explain when you get here," Beans said. I'll be there as soon as possible. In about an hour," Gran said. "Thanks, Gran. See you later," Beans replied. "Just what is your father playing at?" she heard Gran mutter. Beans waited for a few seconds before she put down the phone at her end. She was sure she'd done the right thing. wasn't the sort of conversation to have over the phone. With a sigh, Beans went to join Louisa and Anne. We'll find out what happens when Gran arrives in the next episode. Hope you're well. Hope you're behaving nicely. I hope you are happy. And I hope you're keeping active and doing lots of interesting things while you're at home. And I hope most of all you're looking forward to coming back to school. I can't wait to see you. Remember, you're precious. Bye for now.